My daughter-in-law leaned in close and whispered, "Accidents happen to old people all the time." I didn't panic. I smiled, raised my voice, and said, "What a strange thing to say, dear," making sure everyone nearby heard her threat. The next day, she showed up at my door with the police, but what happened next left her speechless. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment. From which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The laughter around the long table was a warm, bright sound that I, for a moment, allowed myself to believe was real. My 68th birthday. The restaurant was my son's choice, one of those places with crisp white tablecloths and soft lighting that makes everyone look their best. My friends, Irene and Ben, were there, along with a few others from the neighborhood. My son, Marcus, sat to my right, his hand periodically patting my shoulder. To my left was Chloe. I remember the weight of the linen napkin in my lap, the cool stem of my water glass. I remember the particular sheen of Chloe's lip gloss as she smiled, all perfect teeth and practiced warmth. The meal was winding down. A half-eaten slice of caramel cake, my favorite, sat before me. Marcus was telling a story about my years as a school librarian, about how I could silence a rowdy study hall with a single lifted eyebrow. The table chuckled. Chloe's laugh was a half-beat too high, a note too sharp. She leaned toward me then, under the cover of the general mirth. Her movement was intimate, conspiratorial. The scent of her perfume, something expensive and floral, enveloped me. She placed a manicured hand over mine on the tablecloth. Her skin was cool. Her lips were nearly at my ear. The smile stayed fixed on her face, a mask for the people across from us. When she spoke, her voice was a low, sweet venom, a tone meant only for me. "You look tired, Nora," she murmured. The words were solicitous. Then came the others. "You should be careful. Accidents happen to old people all the time." The air left my lungs. The sounds of the restaurant, the clink of silverware, the murmur of other diners receded into a dull roar. A coldness, sharp and clear, shot down my spine and settled in my stomach. It was not fear, not then. It was a profound, chilling recognition. I now know that was the moment the woman I had tried to accept as family dissolved, and the adversary stood fully revealed. My eyes stayed on the centerpiece, a small vase of white lilies. I did not jerk my hand away. I did not gasp. A lifetime of maintaining composure in a world that often expects less from a woman who looks like me took over. In the library, I had faced down entitled students and angry parents. This was simply a different kind of chaos to be quietly mastered. I felt the eyes of our table begin to drift back to us, sensing the shift. Chloe pulled back, her smile widening, a performance of daughterly concern completed. She picked up her wine glass, awaiting my reaction. A flinch, a tear, a whispered plea. She expected a private wound. I turned my head slowly to look at her. I made sure my posture was straight, my shoulders relaxed. I let a small, polite smile touch my own lips. Then I raised my voice. It was not a shout. It was the clear, carrying tone I used to read story time to a room full of children, projecting to the back. "I'm sorry, dear," I said, tilting my head. "Did you just say that accidents happen to old people all the time?" The effect was instantaneous. The conversation at our table died. Irene's fork halted mid-air. Ben's genial expression froze. Marcus's narrative cut off, his face blank with confusion. Chloe's polished smile slipped, just for a fraction of a second, before she rushed to plaster it back on. But her eyes held a flash of pure, startled fury. "Nora, I just said you should get more rest," she trilled, a forced lightness in her voice. "You must have misheard." "No," I said, my voice still calm and audible. I made a point of glancing at Irene, then at Ben, ensuring their attention was absolute. "I heard you quite distinctly. You told me to be careful. Then you said, and I quote, 'Accidents happen to old people all the time.' It was an odd thing to say at a birthday dinner." A terrible silence blanketed our end of the table. A waiter passing by paused subtly, pretending to adjust a setting at the next table. I saw Irene's jaw tighten. Ben's brows drew together. Marcus looked from his wife to me, his confusion deepening into distress. "Mom," Marcus began, his voice tense. "I'm sure Chloe didn't mean—" "Of course I didn't," Chloe interrupted, her laugh now brittle. "It's a joke, a badly phrased joke about being clumsy. Goodness, Nora, don't be so sensitive." "A joke," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. I nodded slowly, as if considering the explanation. "I see. It just didn't sound like one." The rest of the evening passed in a strained pantomime. The cake was finished. The check was paid. Congratulations were offered, but the warmth had been leached from the room. Chloe was visibly seething, a tremor in her hands as she gathered her purse. Marcus was quiet, withdrawn. Irene held my arm a little tighter as we walked to the parking lot. At my car, Irene leaned close. "We all heard you, Nora," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Ben and I, we heard what you repeated. What did she actually say to you?" I met her gaze under the parking lot lights. Exactly what I said she did. Irene's eyes widened, then hardened. She gave a single sharp nod. No more needed to be said between us then. The drive home was quiet. In my rearview mirror, I saw the headlights of Marcus's car following me, a silent escort. When I pulled into my driveway, he got out and came to my door. "Mom," he said, his face pained. "What was that about? You embarrassed Chloe in front of everyone." I looked at my son, this man I loved, who wanted so desperately for the world to be smooth and uncomplicated. "Marcus," I said, my voice weary, "I simply clarified something she whispered to me. If she is embarrassed by having her own words repeated aloud, perhaps she should consider their weight before she speaks them." He ran a hand over his face. "She's under a lot of pressure. Work. The mortgage. She doesn't always think." "That is becoming apparent," I said quietly. I unlocked my front door. "Thank you for dinner. It was a lovely effort." I went inside and closed the door. I did not turn on the lights immediately. I stood in the familiar dark of my own hallway, the scent of my home, books, lemon polish, dried lavender, settling around me. The cold knot in my stomach remained. Looking back, that night was the end of the pretense. Chloe had drawn a line in the sand with her whispered threat. By repeating it, I had not only revealed the line to the witnesses who mattered, I had publicly stepped over it. I had declared that I would not be a quiet victim. The game, as they say, was now afoot. The warmth of the birthday gathering was an illusion that had shattered, and in its place was the clear, hard light of a coming conflict. I knew then, with a certainty that felt like ice, that the polite skirmishes were over. She had intended to frighten me into submission or carelessness. Instead, she had awakened a different kind of woman entirely. I walked to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and prepared for the war she had just begun. The kettle had just begun its low whistle when the knock came at my front door the next morning. It was a firm, authoritative sound, 3 precise raps, not the casual rhythm of Irene or Ben. I turned off the stove. The morning sun streamed through my kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes in the air. I smoothed the front of my house dress and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe. She was dressed in a crisp, pale blue blouse and slacks, her hair perfectly smooth. Flanking her were 2 uniformed police officers, a man and a woman, their faces set in neutral, professional expressions. I took a slow breath, in and out. So it was to begin this way, and so soon. I unlocked the door and opened it. "Good morning," I said, my voice even. Chloe's face was a mask of contorted concern. "Nora, thank goodness you're okay. We were so worried." She turned to the officers. "This is my mother-in-law, Eleanor Beaumont." The female officer, whose nameplate read Officer Reyes, gave a slight nod. "Ma'am, we're here for a wellness check. Your daughter-in-law here expressed some concerns for your safety." "I see," I said, stepping back. "Please, come in. Would you like some tea? The kettle is hot." The officers exchanged a glance, perhaps surprised by the offer. They stepped into my foyer. Chloe followed, her eyes scanning my living room with a clinical sharpness, as if cataloging dust or disorder. "This really isn't necessary, officers," I said, leading them toward the kitchen. "I am perfectly well." "She says that now," Chloe interjected, her tone laced with a sweet, false sadness. "But last night, after her birthday dinner, she became very agitated. She made some disturbing statements about accidents. She seemed confused, paranoid even. I'm her only family in the area, and I fear she may be a danger to herself. She lives alone, you understand, at her age, with no one checking in." I filled the teapot with hot water. The actions were deliberate, placing cups on saucers, retrieving the honey. "I believe the statement you're referring to was your own, Chloe. You whispered it to me at the restaurant. I merely repeated it aloud for clarity. My friends, Irene and Ben, can confirm this." Chloe's smile was thin. "You see? This confusion. She's twisting things. I would never say such a thing. I've been trying to get her to see a doctor about her memory. She's forgetting to take her medications, missing appointments. I had no such appointments. I took my single blood pressure pill each morning with my breakfast. I set the teapot and cups on the kitchen table. Please sit." Officer Reyes remained standing, but her partner, Officer Grant, pulled out a chair. "Thank you, ma'am." "Chloe," I said, pouring the tea, "are you suggesting to these officers that I am incompetent? That I need someone to manage my affairs?" She clasped her hands together. "I'm suggesting you need help, Nora. Support. Perhaps an evaluation. There are processes for her own protection," she said, directing this to Officer Reyes. "A temporary guardianship, if she's deemed a risk to herself. I just want what's best." The words hung in my sunny kitchen. Guardianship. It was a legal cage. It would mean control over my home, my finances, my medical decisions. I felt the cold focus settle over me again, sharper than the day before. I handed Officer Grant his tea. "Officer Reyes, Officer Grant," I said, making sure to use their names, to fix them in my mind and theirs in mine. "I am a 68-year-old retired librarian. I have lived in this home for 32 years. I pay my bills on time. My taxes are current. My doctor will confirm I am of sound mind and body. What you are witnessing is not a wellness check. It is the first step in a campaign of coercion." Officer Reyes's pen hovered over her notepad. "Ma'am, we're just here to assess the situation." "And you have assessed it," I said. "You are in the home of a lucid woman making tea. You have heard an allegation from a relative which is contradicted by other witnesses. You have heard that relative immediately leap to the topic of legal guardianship. I would ask you to document this visit thoroughly. Note the time. Note that I offered you hospitality. Note the specific legal terms she used." Chloe's composure cracked. "She's manipulating you. Can't you see she's clever? This is what I mean. She's paranoid, turning everything into an attack." "Is it paranoia?" I asked, my voice low. "When someone brings law enforcement to your door to suggest you are insane and should have your rights removed? Or is it simply observation?" Officer Grant took a sip of his tea. He looked around the kitchen. It was clean, orderly. A calendar by the phone had neat handwriting in the squares. A vase of fresh daisies sat on the windowsill. "Do you have the contact information for these friends you mentioned, Ms. Beaumont? The ones from the restaurant?" "I do," I said. I walked to the small address book by the telephone and wrote down Irene and Ben's names and number on a slip of paper. I handed it to him. "They live next door. They have known me for 25 years. They were present last night." Officer Reyes took the paper. "We may follow up." She closed her notebook. "At this time, we don't see cause for an emergency intervention, Ms. Beaumont. You appear to be of sound mind and your home is safe. However," she looked at Chloe, then back to me, "family disputes can escalate. We've documented the call and our visit. If there are further concerns, from either party, you know how to reach us." Chloe's face was pale with suppressed anger. "So you're just going to leave her here? Alone?" "She is an adult in her own home, ma'am," Officer Grant said, standing. "There's no legal basis for us to do otherwise. Thank you for the tea, Ms. Beaumont." I walked them to the door. Chloe lingered, her eyes burning into me. "This isn't over, Nora. You need help. I'm trying to help you." "Your definition of help is instructive," I said quietly, so the officers, already stepping onto the porch, might not hear. She left then, following the police to their squad car. I closed the door. I locked it. I engaged the deadbolt, a solid, heavy sound. I leaned against the wood for a moment, listening to the beat of my own heart. It was steady. I returned to the kitchen. The tea was still warm. I sat at the table, in the same spot Officer Grant had occupied. I reviewed the encounter. Chloe had made her move. She had weaponized authority and medicalized her aggression. She had revealed her ultimate goal, control through guardianship. The police had been professional, but they had created a record. That record could be used by her, with a sympathetic doctor or a petition to a court, to build a case. I finished my tea. Then I went to my desk. I opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date and time. I wrote, "Wellness check, initiated by Chloe Beaumont. Officers Reyes and Grant. Mention of guardianship." I noted their badge numbers, which I had memorized from their uniforms. I wrote down every word of the conversation I could recall, especially Chloe's own statements. This was no longer just a personal dislike. It was a legal and social siege. The knocking at my door had not been a request for entry. It had been the first blow against the gates. I put down my pen. The house was quiet, but the silence now had a different quality. It was the silence of a battlefield after the first shot has been fired. I picked up the telephone and dialed Irene's number. It was time to call the cavalry. Irene answered on the second ring. "Nora, I saw the police car. What happened?" "Chloe brought them," I said, my voice calm. "A wellness check. She suggested I might need a guardianship. They've left now. Can you and Ben come over?" There was a beat of silence on the line, then a low, furious sound. "We'll be right there." 5 minutes later, they were at my kitchen table. Irene, her face tight with anger, and Ben, his usual genial expression replaced by one of grim concern. I had already refilled the teapot. I slid my notebook across the table to them, opened to the page where I had documented the morning's events. Irene read it, her lips pressed into a thin line. She passed it to Ben. "She's moving fast," Irene said. "She is," I agreed. The police were professional, but they created a file. That file is a foundation she can build on. With a doctor's note, a petition to a court, it becomes a reality. Ben looked up from the notebook, his fingers tapping the page. "This is a financial play, Nora. Plain and simple. Guardianship means control of assets. Your house is paid off. You have savings." "I know," I said. "But knowing it and proving it are different things. She is creating a narrative, a confused, aging woman who is a danger to herself. We need to dismantle that narrative and replace it with the truth. A calculated attempt at exploitation." Irene leaned forward. "So, what's the plan? We call Marcus? We tell him what his wife is doing?" "Not yet," I said. "Marcus wants peace. He will likely rationalize, say Chloe is just concerned, that she went about it the wrong way. He needs to see evidence he cannot explain away. We need to gather that evidence first. We need to be her opposition in every way she does not expect." Ben nodded slowly. "Okay, operational thinking. We need a three-front strategy: documentation, surveillance, and community." "Explain," I said. "First, documentation." Ben pointed at my notebook. "You've started. We all need to log every interaction: date, time, what was said, who is present. If she calls, note the time and a summary. If she visits, same. If you speak to Marcus, note it. It creates a timeline, a pattern of behavior." Irene pulled a small notepad from her purse and placed it on the table. I'll start mine today. Second, surveillance, Ben continued, not in a creepy way. But we make sure you are never alone with her. One of us is always here if she visits. We answer the door with you. We sit in on conversations. Witnesses deter bad behavior and provide accounts. Also, we should consider recording. Michigan is a two-party consent state, I said. We cannot record a private conversation without her knowledge. True, Ben said, but a doorbell camera that records audio and video of your porch is legal. Security is reasonable, and if a conversation happens in your home with other people present, the expectation of privacy is lower. We can navigate that. Third, community, Irene said, picking up the thread. We activate the network. We don't spread gossip. We share facts. We tell a few key people, Martha at the end of the street, Carl who walks his dog past here 3 times a day, that there is a family situation, that Chloe may try to visit and cause distress, and to please let one of us know if they see her. We turn the neighborhood into an early warning system. It also socially isolates her strategy, I added. If 10 people know she brought the police here to talk about guardianship, it becomes harder for her to paint me as a lonely, confused recluse. She's trying to make me look vulnerable and isolated. We will show I am supported and connected. Exactly, Ben said. We also need to look into her. You said financial play. We need to understand the pressure she's under. Public records. Has she been sued? Is there a lien? What's her debt situation? I can start that, I said, but I'm not as savvy with online searches. I'll help you, Ben said. I was a handyman, but I know my way around a county clerk's website. We do it quietly, from your computer. We sat for a moment, the plan solidifying in the space between us. The fear I had felt at the door was gone, replaced by a focused energy. This was a problem that could be broken down into tasks I could manage. I will also, I said, contact my doctor for a routine appointment. I will tell him I am updating my healthcare directives and would like a general cognitive assessment as part of it. I will get a clean bill of health on the record before she can procure a contradictory one. Irene smiled for the first time since she arrived. It was a sharp smile. That's good. Proactive. One more thing, Ben said, his voice gentle. You need to consider your legal standing beyond defense, updating your will, your power of attorney documents, making sure Marcus, and only Marcus, is listed, with clear backups like Irene. It takes the wind out of her sails. If she knows you've legally walled her out, the guardianship becomes her only tool, and we are making that tool very hard to use. I had already thought of this. I have an appointment with my lawyer, Mr. Evans, next month for my annual review. I will move it up. I will tell him the situation. The tea in our cups had gone cold. The morning sun had climbed higher, filling the kitchen with a clear, bright light. The 3 of us sat there, a council of war in a room that usually only knew peace. This isn't just about protecting me, I said finally. It's about exposing her. The documentation, the community witness, the financial motive. It must all lead to a point where her actions are undeniable, even to Marcus. We are not just building a shield, we are building a case. Irene reached over and covered my hand with hers. Her grip was strong. We're with you, Nora. Every step. Ben nodded. She picked a fight with the wrong street. I looked at my notebook, at the single entry that had started it. I turned to a fresh page. At the top I wrote, Operation, clear title. Below it, I listed our agreed actions in my precise handwriting. 1. Log all interactions. 2. Never be alone with C. 3. Research financials, Ben assist. 4. Activate neighborhood network, Irene lead. 5. Schedule doctor's assessment. 6. Move up lawyer appointment. 7. Install doorbell camera. It was a simple list. It was a battle plan. The warmth in the room was no longer just from the sun. It was the warmth of allegiance, of a shared purpose. The quiet of my home was no longer the silence of a target waiting for the next blow. It was the quiet of a workshop where tools were being assembled. I closed the notebook. The first meeting of the council was adjourned. The work began now. The council meeting ended with a sense of purpose, and the first item on our list required immediate attention. Ben returned after lunch with his laptop. "My machine is faster for this sort of thing," he said, setting it up on my dining room table. The bright screen looked alien against the dark, polished wood. "Where do we even start?" I asked, pulling a chair beside him. "Public records are a good bet. County clerk's website for property, circuit court for civil cases. We're looking for her name, Chloe Beaumont, and also her maiden name, which is Chandler, Chloe Chandler." Ben's fingers flew over the keys. "Let's see if she's been party to any lawsuits. That's often a sign of financial strain." We worked in silence for a while, the only sound the click of the mouse and the hum of the computer. He searched the circuit court records for our county and the adjacent one where Chloe and Marcus lived. I took notes on a legal pad, writing down search terms and results. "Nothing under Beaumont," Ben muttered. "Let's try Chandler." He typed, scanned, then paused. "Okay, here's something. Chloe Chandler versus Premium Card Services. It's a civil suit from 2 years ago, dismissed with prejudice." What does that mean? It means they settled out of court, or she paid. It was a credit card company suing for non-payment. He opened another tab. "Let's check the federal bankruptcy court. Sometimes these things cascade." A few more minutes passed. Then Ben leaned back in his chair. "Nora. She filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy 4 years ago, before she married Marcus. It was discharged, but it's on her record. I wrote it down, a history of debt. That's a motive, but it's old. We need current pressure." Agreed. Ben navigated to the county's Register of Deeds website. "This is where property records are. Your house is here, clean and clear." He typed in my address, and my name appeared as the sole owner with no liens or mortgages. "Now, let's see if there have been any inquiries or paperwork filed that wouldn't show as an official lien." He explained that certain companies, particularly those dealing in reverse mortgages, sometimes file a memorandum of understanding or a preliminary title search when someone expresses serious interest. It wasn't a public record of a loan, but it was a public record of interest. He searched my address again, this time with broader parameters. The list of documents was short. My original deed. A few utility easements from decades ago. Then, at the bottom, a new entry appeared from just 3 weeks prior. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the screen. Ben clicked on it. It was a document titled Authorization for Property Profile and Title Search. It had been filed by a company called Golden Years Equity Solutions. The property listed was my home. The person who had authorized the search was Chloe E. Beaumont. Her signature was a scanned copy on the form. The air in the room grew still. I stared at the screen. There it was, not a smoking gun, but a footprint. She had taken a concrete step. "Golden Years Equity Solutions," Ben said quietly. He opened a new browser window and searched the name. "Yep, reverse mortgage company. High fees, aggressive marketing to seniors." He looked at me. "She was scoping out your equity, Nora, seeing how much she could borrow against your house once she had control." I felt a cold clarity settle over me. The whispered threat, the wellness check, the mention of guardianship. It was all connected to this piece of paper. This was the root. Greed, given form. "Can you search for her current financials? Credit report?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Not legally, no. That's private. But this," he tapped the screen where the title search authorization glowed, "this is public. This is probable cause in the everyday sense. She has significant debt in her past, and she's looking to monetize your biggest asset in the present." I took the legal pad and drew a line down the center of a clean page. On one side, I wrote Chloe's actions. On the other, probable motive. I began filling it in. Action, whispered threat about accidents. Motive, frighten me into appearing unstable or precipitate an actual accident. Action, wellness check, guardianship, hint. Motive, lay groundwork to declare me incompetent, gain legal control. Action, reverse mortgage inquiry. Motive, access cash value of controlled asset. The pattern was unmistakable. It was a plan, crude but effective. It relied on speed, on shocking me into submission or confusion before I could mount a defense. "We need to get a copy of this document," I said, "a certified copy from the county clerk." "I can do that tomorrow," Ben said. "I'll go downtown." "There's more," I said. "Marcus, he must be unaware of this. He would never agree to her taking out a loan against my home." Ben nodded slowly. "Unless she presented it as something else, a financial planning tool for your benefit. Or maybe she hasn't told him at all. The form only has her signature." That was a crucial distinction. Was Marcus a willing participant in this, or was he another one of her targets? My heart argued for his ignorance. My mind forced me to consider the alternative. "We keep this between us for now," I said. "Irene can know, but we do not approach Marcus yet. This is a piece of evidence, but it's circumstantial on its own. She could say she was researching options for me out of concern. We need something that ties her predatory intent directly to her actions, a statement, an admission." "The recording," Ben said. "If we can engineer a situation where she admits to the plan, thinking she's won—" "Exactly." I looked back at the screen, at her signature. It was a confident, looping script. She had been so sure of herself. She had not considered that a retired librarian would know how to research, or that she had allies who would help her do it. She saw age as a weakness. She did not see the patience, the diligence, the network it had built over decades. "Print it," I said. "Print everything you found. The lawsuit, the bankruptcy, this title search. We'll add it to the file." The printer whirred to life, spitting out pages of my potential undoing, now transformed into weapons. Each sheet was a thread, and we were slowly pulling them, unraveling her design. The digital glow of the computer screen in my quiet dining room felt like the light of a detective's office. We weren't just building a shield anymore. We were assembling a case file. And the motive, the cold financial engine of it all, was now on paper. I placed the warm printouts in a new manila folder. I labeled it with simple precision, "Financial Motive." It was the first exhibit. There would be more. The manila folder labeled "Financial Motive" was still on my dining table when Marcus called 2 days later. His voice on the phone was strained, hesitant. "Mom, can I come by? Just me. We need to talk." "Of course," I said. "Anytime." I did not put the folder away. I placed it on the coffee table in the living room, next to a small digital voice recorder I had borrowed from Ben. Irene had made a discreet call to the restaurant manager, an old student of mine, from my library days. A copy of the security audio from the birthday dinner, from the microphone near our table, now existed on a thumb drive. It was plugged into my laptop, which sat closed on the side table. Marcus arrived looking tired. He wore a simple polo shirt and khakis, his usual weekend clothes, but they seemed rumpled. He gave me a quick, tense hug. "Can I get you something?" I asked, returning to the living room. "No, I'm fine." He sat heavily on the edge of the armchair, opposite the sofa. He rubbed his hands together. "Mom, we need to clear the air, about the dinner, about the police." I sat on the sofa, hands folded in my lap. "I agree. Chloe is—" "She's devastated," he began, his eyes on the rug. "She feels you've completely misinterpreted her. She was worried about you. She still is. She thinks you're isolating yourself, that you're maybe not thinking clearly. This business with the police—" She overreacted, I told her that, but her heart was in the right place. "She just wants to make sure you're safe." I listened, saying nothing. This was the rationalization I had predicted, the plea for peace. He looked up, seeking agreement in my face. "Can't we just move past this? Have a fresh start? Maybe you could apologize for causing a scene at the restaurant, and she could apologize for calling the police without talking to me first. We could all have dinner again, properly." "Marcus," I said, my voice quiet, Do you believe I am confused? That I am a danger to myself? He shifted uncomfortably. No, of course not, but you're not getting any younger. Things happen. Chloe sees that. She's just being proactive. Proactive, I repeated. I leaned forward and opened the laptop. Before we discuss apologies or fresh starts, there is something you need to hear. It's from the restaurant. I clicked play on the audio file. The sounds of the dinner filled the room, the murmur of conversation, the clink of glasses, the distant laughter. Then, clear as a bell, came Chloe's voice, low and sweetly venomous. You look tired, Nora. You should be careful. Accidents happen to old people all the time. A beat of restaurant noise, then my voice louder, clear. I'm sorry, dear? Did you just say that accidents happen to old people all the time? The recording ended. I closed the laptop. Marcus's face had gone pale. He stared at the blank screen as if it still held the image of that moment. That's what you said, she said, but hearing it is different, I finished for him. Now you know the exact tone, the intimacy of the whisper. The words are one thing, the delivery is another. He swallowed hard. It sounds bad, but she explained it was a joke, a clumsy joke. Marcus, I said. I picked up the manila folder. A joke is one thing, a pattern is another. I opened the folder and took out the top sheet, the printout of the title search authorization from Golden Years Equity Solutions. I handed it to him. He took it, his eyes scanning. I watched as his brow furrowed in confusion. This is our address. Your house. What is this? It is an authorization for a property profile and title search, filed 3 weeks ago by Chloe with a reverse mortgage company. His head snapped up. A reverse mortgage? On your house? Why would she? The question died on his lips as the implication reached him. His eyes dropped back to the paper, to her signature. There's more, I said, my voice flat. I handed him the bankruptcy discharge notice and the record of the dismissed civil suit. She has a history of significant debt. This, I tapped the title search, is not a joke. It is not proactive care. It is a financial inquiry into the largest asset I own, an inquiry she made without your knowledge and certainly without mine. He took the papers, one after another. His hands began to shake. He read each line, each formal, damning phrase. The color drained completely from his face, replaced by a sickly gray hue. She never told me, he whispered, more to himself than to me. A reverse mortgage? Why? He looked at me, his eyes wide with dawning horror. The wellness check, the talk about guardianship. My God, she wasn't trying to protect you. She was trying to get control. He said it aloud, the connection I needed him to make himself. It appears so, I said quietly. He dropped the papers on the coffee table as if they were hot. He put his head in his hands. A low, ragged sound escaped him. I didn't know. Mom, I swear to you, I had no idea. I thought she was just being high-strung, insensitive. I thought you two were just butting heads. He looked up, his eyes red. This is predatory. This is evil. The word hung in the air between us. It was his word, not mine. I let it sit. What do I do? He asked, his voice broken. What do we do? First, I said, you believe me. Second, you understand that this is not a family squabble. This is a legal and ethical assault. She has already involved the police. She is laying groundwork to have me declared incompetent. The goal is guardianship, followed by liquidation of my assets to solve her financial problems. He stood up abruptly, pacing the length of the rug. I'll talk to her. I'll make her stop. I'll tell her it's over. Talking will only warn her, I said. She will deny, she will cry, she will say I'm manipulating you with forged documents. She will accelerate her plans. You cannot reason with a strategy. You must counter it. He stopped pacing and looked at me. For the first time, I saw, not my son, the peacemaker, but a man facing an intolerable betrayal. What's the counter? We continue to document, we secure legal advice, and we need evidence of her intent beyond these papers. A statement, something that removes all doubt. I paused. I may be able to obtain that, but I will need you to be ready. When we have it, you will have to choose, publicly and finally. He walked back to the chair and sank into it. He looked at the scattered papers, then at me. The grief and shame on his face were profound. I have already chosen. I am so sorry, Mom. I was blind. I was stupid. You wanted to believe the best of your wife, I said. It was not absolution, but a fact. Now you must face the worst of her. Can you do that? He met my gaze. The passivity was gone, burned away by the audio and the cold print. In its place was a hard, determined anger. Yes, I will do whatever you need. This ends. I'll make it right. I nodded. The unwitting ally was now awake. The dynamic of the war had just shifted irrevocably. I collected the papers and placed them back in the folder. The digital recorder sat silently between us, a witness to his awakening. The next phase would require his performance, not just his belief. But for now, the first and most crucial victory was won. My son was finally on my side. The following afternoon, with Marcus's horrified awakening still fresh, I dialed Chloe's number. I used my landline. Irene sat at my kitchen table, a small, high-quality digital recorder before her. We had tested it. The microphone was sensitive. The plan was simple. Irene would be in the adjoining sunroom, the door left ajar just enough. She would start recording when she heard Chloe's voice. It was a calculated risk on consent, but the sunroom was a common area of my home, and the expectation of complete privacy for a visitor there was arguable. We were prepared to argue it. Chloe answered on the fourth ring. Nora? Her voice was cool, guarded. Chloe, I'm calling about our situation. I kept my tone weary, conciliatory. I've been thinking. Perhaps I did overreact at the restaurant. The police visit was a shock. I've been upset. Marcus and I talked, and he helped me see that your intentions, however poorly expressed, likely came from a place of concern. A pause on the line. I could almost hear her mind working, recalculating. I'm glad to hear you say that, Nora. It's been so stressful for everyone. It has, I agreed. I'd like to clear the air, properly. Would you come over for tea tomorrow? Just the two of us. We can talk. I'd like to apologize for my part in this misunderstanding. Another, shorter pause. I imagined her triumphant smile. She would think her wellness check had frightened me into submission. She would think Marcus had pressured me to make peace. Of course. I'd like that. What time? 3 o'clock, I said. I'll be there. I hung up. Irene met my eyes and gave a single firm nod. The trap was set. At 2:55 the next day, everything was prepared. The teapot, cups, and a plate of shortbread cookies were on the coffee table in the living room. I sat on the sofa. Irene was in the sunroom, the recorder in her lap, out of sight behind a large armchair. The door between the rooms was open 3 inches. The doorbell camera, installed 2 days prior, would capture her arrival. At 3:02, the doorbell chimed. I saw Chloe's composed face on the monitor. I took a breath, smoothed my dress, and went to answer. Chloe, thank you for coming. I stepped back to let her in. She entered, her eyes making a swift appraisal of the entryway, the living room. She wore another expensive-looking ensemble, a cream-colored sweater set and trousers. She carried a small leather folder. Thank you for inviting me, Nora. Your home looks lovely as always. We settled in the living room. I poured the tea. Sugar, milk? Just lemon, please. She accepted the cup, her smile placid. This is nice. A calm conversation is what we've needed. I agree, I said, adding milk to my own cup. I realize I may have become defensive. At my age, one is sensitive to implications of decline. She waved a dismissive hand. It's a difficult transition for everyone, recognizing limitations, accepting help. She took a sip. My approach was clumsy, I admit. Bringing the police was extreme. I was just so worried. Living alone at your stage of life, it's a burden. On you, and honestly, on those who care about you. A burden, I repeated, keeping my voice soft. Of course, she said, leaning forward slightly. The upkeep of this big house, the bills, the worry about falls, illnesses. Marcus loses sleep over it. I lose sleep. We have our own lives, our own financial pressures, but we're expected to be on constant alert. It's not sustainable, Nora. I nodded slowly, as if considering a profound truth. You feel burdened by me. Not by you, she corrected, her tone sweetly condescending. By the situation. There are solutions that ease the burden for everyone. Structured care, managed assets. You could be comfortable, safe, and Marcus and I could have peace of mind. We could finally breathe. Managed assets, I said. You mean like a reverse mortgage? To free up equity? She didn't flinch. She had come prepared. She opened the leather folder. I've done some research. Golden Years Equity Solutions has excellent programs. You could access the value of this home without having to move. The funds could pay for in-home care, a nice retirement community. It would simplify everything. She slid a glossy brochure across the coffee table toward me. The company logo matched the one on the title search authorization. And if I didn't want to move or have strangers caring for me? I asked, my voice still mild. Her smile tightened just at the edges. Sometimes, Nora, what we want isn't what's best for us. Or for our family. That's where legal protections come in. Guardianship isn't a punishment. It's a tool. A tool to ensure safety and sound financial management when someone can no longer be objective about their own capabilities. I looked at the brochure, then back at her. So the plan is this. You gain control of my affairs through a court. You take out a reverse mortgage on my home. That solves your financial pressures, and I am placed somewhere comfortable and safe. Is that correct? The bluntness of my summary, delivered without anger, seemed to throw her. She recovered quickly. You make it sound so cold. It's about care and legacy. You wouldn't want to be a weight around Marcus's neck, would you? You wouldn't want your stubbornness to drain his resources, his future? This way, your assets provide for your care. It's responsible. It's what's best for everyone. There it was, the core of it. A weight around his neck, drain his resources, best for everyone. She had said it all, thinking she was persuading a defeated old woman. I took a slow sip of my tea, letting the silence stretch. Then I said, and the comment about accidents at my birthday? Was that also part of what's best for everyone? A quicker solution? Her composure slipped. A flash of irritation crossed her face. That was a private moment. You chose to misinterpret it. But yes, if you must be crude, sudden declines in health do happen at your age. They can simplify difficult decisions. They're not always the worst outcome for a family facing prolonged strain. I placed my cup back on its saucer. The click was precise in the quiet room. I see. Thank you for being so clear, Chloe, for explaining it all so thoroughly. She leaned back, assuming my quiet tone was one of surrender. She took a cookie. I'm glad we can finally talk, frankly. This is a new beginning for us, Nora. You'll see. From the sunroom, there was the faintest sound of fabric shifting. Irene had stopped the recording. The confession was complete. Yes, I said, looking at my daughter-in-law with a calm I did not have to feign anymore. I believe it is. The sound of Chloe's car engine faded down the street. I remained seated on the sofa. Irene emerged from the sunroom, the digital recorder held carefully in her hand. She didn't speak. She simply pressed play. Our voices filled the room again, this time from the recorder. Chloe's confident, condescending tone was unmistakable. A burden on you, and honestly, on those who care about you. Then later, structured care, managed assets, the offer of the brochure. Guardianship isn't a punishment, it's a tool. And finally, the damning clarity. Sudden declines in health do happen at your age. They can simplify difficult decisions. They're not always the worst outcome for a family facing prolonged strain. Irene stopped the recording. It's all there, crystal clear. We need copies, multiple copies, and a transcript, I said, standing. The weariness I had feigned for Chloe was gone, replaced by a focused energy. We call Marcus. Then we call the lawyer. Marcus arrived within 20 minutes. He listened to the recording in silence, his face hardening into a mask of grim disgust. When it finished, he looked at me. I've already made an appointment. A colleague at work recommended her. Sophia Reyes. She specializes in elder law and family litigation. She can see us tomorrow morning at 10. The name was familiar. Officer Reyes, I said. The female officer from the wellness check. A relation. Her sister-in-law, apparently, Marcus said. Small world. My colleague said she's sharp and has no patience for financial exploitation. It felt like a good omen, a connection. The officer who had witnessed Chloe's first move had a relative who could help us execute the last. The next morning at 9:50, Marcus and I sat in a modern, minimalist office in a downtown professional building. Sophia Reyes was in her late 40s, with intelligent eyes and an air of efficient calm. She shook our hands, her grip firm. Marcus has given me a brief outline, she said, gesturing for us to sit at a small conference table. But I'd like to hear it from you, Ms. Beaumont. From the beginning. I told her. I started with the birthday dinner whisper and my public repetition of it. I handed her my logbook, open to the entry about the police wellness check and Chloe's mention of guardianship. Then I presented the financial motive folder, the bankruptcy, the civil suit, the title search authorization. Finally, I placed the digital recorder on the table. This was recorded yesterday in my home, I said. My friend Irene was present in an adjoining room. The purpose was to capture a clear statement of intent after these preliminary actions. Attorney Reyes picked up the recorder. May I? Please. She listened, her expression neutral, occasionally making a note on a legal pad. She did not react visibly to Chloe's words, but I saw a slight tightening around her eyes at the mention of accidents simplifying decisions. When it ended, she set the recorder down. The consent issue for the recording is gray, she said matter-of-factly. Michigan law requires all parties to consent to the recording of a private conversation. However, a strong argument can be made that a conversation in a home with another person present in an adjoining room with the door open carries a diminished expectation of privacy, especially given the subject matter, discussions of legal guardianship and asset liquidation. A court may allow it. Regardless, its primary value may not be as formal evidence, but as leverage. It is profoundly persuasive. She turned her attention to the paper trail. This is excellent documentation. The title search is a tangible step demonstrating interest in your equity. The prior financial history establishes a pattern of debt and motive. Combined with the police report she generated, it paints a clear picture of a predatory strategy. Create a paper trail of alleged incapacity, then exploit it for financial gain. What can we do? Marcus asked, his voice tense. Several things in sequence, Reyes said. First, we go on the offensive with the police. We file a report of our own. We allege attempted financial exploitation and fraudulent reporting. We present this evidence. We request that they note in their file that the initial wellness check was likely part of a scheme. This does two things. It discredits her future attempts to use law enforcement, and it creates an official record of her wrongdoing. I nodded. That made sense. Turn her weapon against her. Second, we draft a cease and desist letter. It will be sent to Chloe, with a copy to any relevant third parties like Golden Years Equity Solutions. It states that she is to have no further contact with you, miss. Beaumont regarding your assets, care, or guardianship. It references the evidence we have of her actions and warns of legal consequences for continued harassment or attempted interference. This often stops the behavior in its tracks. And if it doesn't? I asked. Then third, we petition for a personal protection order, a restraining order. Based on the threat implied in the accidents comment and the pattern of harassment, including weaponizing the police, we have grounds. A judge would likely grant a temporary order. The hearing for a permanent order would force all this evidence into open court. That is a scenario she will want to avoid. Marcus leaned forward. What about the guardianship? She could still file a petition. She could, Reyes acknowledged, but now she would be doing so against an opponent who is legally represented, who has preemptively filed police reports against her, and who has evidence of her financial motive. No family court judge looks kindly on that. We would countersue for abuse of process and malicious prosecution. It would be a legal and financial disaster for her. I will also help you, Ms. Beaumont, formally update your durable power of attorney and healthcare directives, naming Marcus and a backup, explicitly excluding Chloe. We lock the doors before she even reaches them. I felt a solid weight settle in my chest. Not relief, but certainty. This was the map. How soon can we begin? The cease and desist letter can go out today. I'll draft it now. You can sign it before you leave. I'll also prepare the paperwork for the police report. You can file it this afternoon. She looked at Marcus. You understand that this will likely end your marriage. Marcus's jaw was set. It ended when she targeted my mother. I'm just making it official. Then my final recommendation, Reyes said, her tone softening slightly, is that you prepare for the personal confrontation. The serving of legal documents often triggers a dramatic response. You should be ready. I gathered my folders. The recorded confession, which had felt like our ultimate weapon, was now just one piece of a larger, formal apparatus. We were moving from the kitchen table to the courtroom, from strategy to law. We are ready, I said, and for the first time, I believed it completely. Marcus and I left Attorney Reyes's office with a signed cease and desist letter and a completed petition for a personal protection order. The next steps were precise, and they required separation of actions. The legal machinery would operate independently of the personal reckoning, but their timing would be coordinated for maximum impact. A process server will deliver the cease and desist and the petition to her at the condo today after 5. Marcus explained as he drove me home. His voice was calm, methodical. He had shifted into a mode of execution. I'll be there, waiting inside. After she is served, I will speak to her. I have the post-nuptial agreement drafted. I have copies of everything, the audio transcript, the financial records. What exactly will you say? I asked, looking out the window at the passing streets. The truth, that I know everything, that her choices are to sign the post-nup waiving all claim to your estate and enter intensive marriage counseling, or I file for divorce immediately and send copies of all the evidence to her parents, her sister, and the HR department at her firm. He paused. Her job at the luxury realty office depends on her reputation. A scandal about attempted elder exploitation would terminate her. It was a harsh ultimatum. It was designed to be. And if she chooses divorce and fights, then we fight, he said, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. With the restraining order, the police report, and the evidence, she will lose. She will be exposed, and she will get nothing. I believe she will choose the post-nup. It allows her to save face, to keep her job, to avoid public humiliation. It's the only thread of control she has left. He dropped me off at my house. Irene was waiting on the porch. We did not speak of the plan. We simply waited. The afternoon stretched, taut and silent. At 5:45, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Server has made contact. Going in now. Then nothing. The scene, as Marcus later recounted it to me, unfolded with a brutal clarity. The process server, a neutral woman in a plain jacket, had met Chloe at the door of her chic, impersonal condo. She had handed her the envelope, confirmed her identity, and stated the nature of the documents. Chloe's face, initially puzzled, had contorted in rage as she scanned the first page. The cease and desist from Attorney Reyes, citing fraud and exploitation. As the server walked away, Marcus stepped out from where he had been waiting in the parking lot. He approached the open doorway. Chloe saw him, the papers trembling in her hand. "What is this?" she shrieked, waving the envelope. "Is this your mother's doing? These lies." "They're not lies," Marcus said, his voice quiet. He stepped past her into the condo, closing the door. The space was decorated in cool grays and whites, always looking like a model unit, not a home. "They are documented facts. I've heard the restaurant audio. I've seen the bankruptcy, the title search on my mother's house. I've listened to the recording from yesterday's tea." Her fury shifted, tinged with panic. "Recording? What recording? That's illegal. She can't—" "She did, and I heard every word. About me losing sleep, about me being burdened, about accidents simplifying decisions." He said the words slowly, letting each one land. "You weren't trying to help my mother. You were trying to monetize her. You were going to have her declared incompetent and take her money. It was for us," she cried, her desperation raw. "For our future. That house is just sitting there, full of equity. She's old, Marcus. She's going to die anyway, and we're drowning in my student loans, the car notes. I was doing this for our family." "You were doing it for your debt," he corrected coldly. "You used concern as a weapon. You used me as your blind tool. You brought police to my mother's door. You are not my family. You are a threat to my family." He placed his own folder on her pristine glass coffee table. "You have two choices. 1. You sign this post-nuptial agreement, waiving any and all claim to my mother's estate, now and forever. You enter marriage counseling with me and individual therapy. We attempt to rebuild from this, though I make no promises. The evidence remains private." She stared at the document as if it were a snake. "And the other?" 2. I leave tonight. I file for divorce in the morning. Simultaneously, I send a detailed packet containing the audio transcript, the financial records, and a summary of your guardianship scheme to your parents, your sister, and the managing broker at your firm. I will not hide what you are. The restraining order will be made permanent. You will fight the divorce with no money, a ruined reputation, and no allies." The color drained completely from her face. She looked from the legal papers in her hand to the post-nup on the table. The arithmetic of her downfall was inescapable. The public exposure, the professional annihilation, that was what she feared more than losing Marcus. Her whole identity was built on a facade of polished success. "You wouldn't," she whispered, but it was a plea, not a challenge. "I have already prepared the emails," he said. "They are drafted. The addresses are entered. All they need is a click. The choice is yours. Sign or watch your life burn down." He told me she stood there for a long time, silent, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her own miscalculation. She had thought him passive, malleable. She had thought me weak, isolated. She had not accounted for our alliance or for the quiet ferocity that betrayal can ignite. Finally, she walked to the table. She picked up the pen. Without looking at him, she flipped to the signature page of the post-nuptial agreement and signed her name. The stroke of the pen was the sound of her surrender. "Counseling appointments start next week," Marcus said, collecting the signed document. "I will be staying elsewhere until further notice. Do not contact my mother. Any communication goes through my lawyer." He left her there, standing alone in her cold, perfect condo, the restraining order and cease and desist still clutched in her other hand. The dual serving was complete. The legal and personal consequences had landed in the same moment, collapsing her schemes into dust. The confrontation was over. The victory was secured. All that remained was the mopping up and the rebuilding. 2 days after Chloe's surrender, Irene appeared on my doorstep at 10 in the morning. She was carrying a bag of charcoal briquettes. Ben was behind her, hefting a folding table. "What's all this?" I asked, holding the door open. "Spontaneous combustion," Irene said, brushing past me into the kitchen. "We're having a block party today, right out front." I followed her. "A block party? It's Tuesday." "The best day for one," Ben said, setting the table down with a clatter. "Unexpected, authentic. Martha is bringing her famous baked beans. Carl is firing up his portable grill. The Johnsons are bringing lemonade. It's happening." I understood then. This was not a celebration. It was a deployment, a visible, tangible mustering of forces. The community shield made manifest. "Who did you tell?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Just that there was a family issue now resolved and that we were showing support for our neighbor, Irene said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "People understand. They saw the police car last week. The grapevine has been humming. This is our answer." By noon, the quiet cul-de-sac was transformed. Grills smoked at the curb. Folding chairs dotted several front lawns, clustered in conversational groups. A cooler of sodas sat on a bed of ice on my own driveway. Children rode bicycles in lazy loops. The smell of grilling meat and the sound of classic soul music from a portable speaker filled the air. It was a weekday, so not everyone was there, but enough were. Martha, Carl, the Johnsons, the Wilsons from 3 doors down. A solid, friendly crowd. I moved from group to group, accepting hugs, gentle pats on the arm, glasses of lemonade. No one asked probing questions. They simply said, "Good to see you, Nora," and "We're always here," and "This street looks after its own." Their presence was the message. Irene presided over the food table like a general. Ben held court by the grill, flipping burgers with a theatrical flair. Marcus arrived after work, still in his office shirt, but he loosened his tie and accepted a plate. He looked around at the gathering, his eyes meeting mine. He gave a small, grateful nod. This was his community, too. This was the world Chloe had tried to make him believe was a burden. The golden hour of late afternoon approached, painting the street in warm light. I was standing by Irene, sharing a quiet laugh about Ben's apron, when I saw it. A familiar silver sedan slowed at the entrance to the cul-de-sac. It was Chloe's car. She must have been driving home from work, taking her usual route. She could have turned around. She did not. She crept forward, her car moving at a walking pace. Every head did not turn. That would have been too obvious, too staged. But people noticed. A slight pause in conversation. A casual glance toward the street. Ben stopped flipping burgers for a moment, his spatula held mid-air. Irene took a slow sip of her drink, her eyes fixed on the car. I did not move. I stood beside my friends, a paper plate in my hand, a smile still on my face from the interrupted laugh. The car windows were tinted, but I knew she could see. She could see the grills, the tables, the children playing. She could see Marcus talking easily with Carl. She could see me, surrounded, anchored, protected by a wall of people who knew my name and had chosen a Tuesday to prove it. The car paused almost directly in front of my house. For 5 long seconds, it was still. I imagined her behind the wheel, seeing the tangible proof of her failure. The isolation she had tried to impose on me was now hers alone. The community she had dismissed as irrelevant had become my fortress. Then the car accelerated a little too quickly and disappeared around the bend. The normal sounds of the block party resumed. The music, the chatter, the sizzle of the grill. Irene leaned close, her voice for my ears only. "I do believe she got the message." "I believe she did," I said. The party continued until dusk. We ate. We talked about mundane things, the weather, a new restaurant downtown, the upcoming school fundraiser, the ordinary, comforting rhythm of neighborhood life. As people began to pack up, thanking me as if I had been the host, I felt a profound sense of reclamation. This street, these homes, these people, they were not just my address, they were my constituency. Chloe had tried to wage a war of paperwork and whispers. I had countered with a block party. When only Irene, Ben, and Marcus remained, helping me carry the last chairs and coolers inside, the silence of my home felt different. It was no longer the silence of being alone. It was the silence of a space that had been loudly, joyfully defended. "That was quite something," Marcus said, wiping down the now empty table. "It was necessary," I replied. I looked at my son, my friend, and her husband. It was a statement of fact. The social victory was complete. The legal barriers were in place. The threat had been neutralized, exposed, and exiled. As I locked my front door that night, I did not feel triumph. I felt a deep, solid peace. The siege was over. The walls had held, and tomorrow I would work in my garden. The smell of damp earth and the sharp green scent of tomato vines filled the air. Early morning sun, still soft and golden, warmed the back of my neck as I knelt in my garden. The soil was cool and crumbly between my fingers. I was pinching suckers from the tomato plants, a methodical task that required attention but no deep thought. The peace was absolute, broken only by the distant chirp of sparrows and the low hum of a lawnmower several yards away. This was my sanctuary, my victory garden, though the victory had not been won here. It had been won with paper and recordings and the weight of witnessed words. But here, in the quiet consistency of growth, I felt it settle into my bones. The back screen door squeaked open and slapped shut. Irene's footsteps crunched on the gravel path. She held 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one down to me and settled on the wooden bench I kept under the old maple tree. "Ben wants to know if we're deactivating the spy ring," she said, sipping her coffee. "He says his decoder ring is getting rusty." A small smile touched my lips. "Tell him to keep it polished. One never knows." She chuckled. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching a fat bumblebee lumber from one zucchini blossom to the next. "Marcus called me last night," I said, my eyes on my work. "He had his first counseling session. He said it was difficult. That saying the things aloud made them real in a new way." "And how is he?" Irene asked, her voice gentle. "He sounded tired, but clear. He's staying in a short-term rental. The post-nup is filed. He said Chloe has contacted him only through her lawyer to discuss logistics for returning some of his things from the condo. There is no fight left in her. Not after the block party, he thinks. Seeing that, it made the abstract real for her too. "Good," Irene said, and the word was a solid, satisfied thing. I finished with the tomatoes and moved to the row of bush beans, checking for pests. The actions were slow, deliberate. This was the rhythm I had fought to preserve, not just the house, but the life within it, the right to putter in my garden on a Wednesday morning. "I have an appointment with Mr. Evans tomorrow," I said, "to finalize the updates to my will. Marcus knows?" He helped me draft the changes. A significant portion, after his inheritance, will go to the community center to fund the after-school program and the senior gardening project. It felt symmetrical. Irene nodded approvingly, a legacy that grows things, better than gathering dust in a bank vault. That was precisely it. Chloe had seen my assets as stagnant value to be liquidated. I saw them as seeds, for Marcus's future, for the community's. The revised will and the updated power of attorney that named Marcus and Irene as successors were not just legal documents. They were blueprints for a future she could not touch. My phone, sitting on the bench next to Irene, buzzed. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and answered. It was Officer Reyes, the one who had come to my door that tense morning. "Ms. Beaumont, I'm just following up," she said, her professional tone now edged with something like respect. "We've completed our review of the report you filed regarding attempted financial exploitation. We've added it to the file from the initial wellness check, with a clear notation that the initial call was determined to be part of a predatory pattern. It's flagged accordingly. If she ever tries to use us as a tool again, the system will show the history. Thank you, officer. I appreciate you letting me know. My sister-in-law, the attorney, she said it was a clean case, well documented. You did everything right. I had good help, I said, glancing at Irene. After I hung up, Irene raised her mug in a silent toast. Another thread tied off, another door locked. The morning wore on. Irene went home to start her own day. I remained in the garden, weeding around the peonies. The physical work was a pleasure, a testament to my own capable hands. There was no fear in the quiet, no anticipation of a knock, a whisper, a legal threat. The machinery of my defense, the neighborhood watch, the legal barriers, the recorded confession, the united front with my son, had achieved its purpose. It had not just stopped an attack, it had restored a profound and simple autonomy. Later, after a shower, I sat at my desk. The financial motive folder and my logbook were there. I opened a new, clean folder. I labeled it Resolved. I moved the contents of the old folder into it. I added a copy of the filed police report, the restraining order, and the signed post-nuptial agreement cover sheet. I placed the digital recorder and the thumb drive from the restaurant in a small box beside it. The evidence was no longer a weapon. It was an archive, a record of a battle that was over. I closed the drawer. The desk was clear except for my current reading, a novel about botany in the Victorian age. Nothing about crime or law or revenge. As the afternoon sun slanted through the west window, casting long shadows across my living room rug, I felt it fully. Not the heat of anger, nor the cold grip of strategy. A settled warmth. The house was silent, but it was my silence. The garden outside was thriving, and it was my garden. My son was finding his way through a painful betrayal, but he was doing so with his eyes open, and he was doing it on his own terms. Poetic justice, the outline had called it. I suppose it was. Her own words had trapped her. Her greed had isolated her. The community she scorned had become my armor. But the deeper satisfaction was not in her defeat. It was in my own continued presence, in the unbroken line of my days, in the knowledge that my strength, quiet and long forged, had been enough. I went to the kitchen and prepared a simple dinner for one. I ate at the table by the window, watching the light change on the leaves of my maple tree. The future was not a fearful question mark. It was a series of mornings in the garden, of conversations with Irene, of phone calls with my son. It was my legacy, carefully tended. I finished my meal, washed the single plate, and looked out at the gathering twilight. My home and my heart were safe. The story was done, and that was everything.